All right, we're going to do a little more work on the unit circle. If you remember, we did this before. We're going to practice that again. I'm going to do 2 quadrants. You're going to do the other 2 for homework. And then I'm going to do a graph on the back of this, and you're going to do 1 graph for homework. So finish the table and do the second graph. Now, before we do this table, I'm going to fill out this little chart here. Now, you can go ahead and print this out. I'll put this in your homework or your notes, either one. I don't know which one I'm going to do. Print it out, and then you can fill this in. All right, so this chart, this table right here is probably the most important thing for the unit circle. And remember when we did this the first time, we start with the sign, and we did the square root of 0 over 2, square root of 1 over 2, the square root of 2 over 2, the square root of 3 over 2, and the square root of 4 over 2, which is 1. Square root of 4 is 2, 2 over 2 is 1. And then the nice thing about the cosine is just these same ones in reverse order. So this one's 1, that's the square root of 3 over 2. This one's the square root of 2 over 2. This is 1/2. And this last one, cosine, where your x value at 90 degrees is 0. Your tangent is also known as your sine divided by cosine. 0 divided by 1 is 0. I'm going to come back to this one. Any number divided by itself is 1. Come back to that one. Can't divide by 0, so tangent is undefined at 90 degrees. Now, the way I remember these two, it's the third one on the list, so they both have a square root of 3 in them. But the one with the 3 in the degree has a 3 on the bottom. And that will help me fill out this quadrant 1, because the sine of 0 is 0. Remember, that's your y value. I'm going to fill out these quadrantals first. This one is 1, 0, and remember we label these cosine sine. This one is 0, 1, cosine sine. So you notice at 90 degrees, cosine is 0, exactly what my chart says. Right over here is -1, 0, cosine sine. This one down here is 0, -1, cosine sine. And in quadrant 1, I'm going to start with the degrees. This one was 0 or 360 degrees. They're the same. 30 degrees, 45 degrees, 60 degrees, 90 degrees. I'm going to skip quadrant 2. You're going to fill that one out. I'm going to fill out quadrant 3. Now notice this angle is 30 degrees away from the x-axis, so is this. This is 180 degrees. Plus 30 would be 210. Plus 45 is 225. Plus 60 is 240. Plus 90 would be 270 degrees. And of course you're going to fill out the degrees here and here. I'm going to do the radians. This is 0 radians or 2 pi radians. And the 30s, the multiples of 30, 30 is pi over 6. And the multiples of them, 1 pi over 6, 2 pi over 6, which reduces 3 pi over 6, which is pi over 2. And they keep going on. This is pi over here, so that's 6 pi over 6, and this would be 7 pi over 6, and this would be 8 pi over 6. And you're going to fill out the rest of them. And the ones right in the middle of 45 degrees, and those are multiples of pi over 4. 1 pi over 4, 2 pi over 4. This is 4 pi over 4, so this one must be 5 pi over 4. All right, you fill out the degrees and the radians for quadrants 2 and 4. And this one, I'll give you this. This is 3 pi over 2. All right, so these ordered pairs come from this little table here because remember, your cosine is your x, your sine is your y. So what is the cosine at 30 degrees? Cosine of 30 is square root 3 over 2. And your sine at 30 is 1/2. So I can fill out quadrant 1, all of these ordered pairs, just from this little chart. Sine and cosine are both the same at 45, square root 2 over 2. And then this one is 60 degrees, your sine, your y is square root 3 over 2, your cosine is 1/2. That's just this ordered pair reversed. So any of the multiples of 60 will have this ordered pair, remember cosine, sine. And I've mentioned this before, all seniors turn crazy. Well, what that means is all of your trig ratios, sine, cosine, and tangent, are positive here. Only your sine is positive in 2. I'll go over that in a minute why. Only your tangent's positive in 3, and only your cosine is positive in 4. The reason why is because every ordered pair in this quadrant is plus. Your cosine's positive, your sine's positive. They're all positive, and tangent is sine over cosine. Over here, your x's are negative, your y's are positive. So your cosine is negative, your sine is positive. Down here, to get to quadrant 3, you have to go left and then down. So your cosine is negative, your sine is negative. Over here, go to the right, your x is positive, your y is negative. So cosine positive, sine negative. That's where I get this all. Seniors turn crazy. All right, I'm going to fill out quadrant 3, but all I really need is the angles in quadrant 1 to help me, because this angle here, which is 30 degrees from the x-axis, that's our reference angle. This one's also 30 degrees from the x-axis, so my reference angle is 30. Anything with a 6 on the bottom has a reference angle. I bet this one has a 6. So does this one. Has a reference angle of 30. So I take this ordered pair at 30 degrees, put the exact thing over here, but make them both negative. This next one is 45 degrees away from the x-axis, just like this one. So I take the same ordered pair I have here, put it down here, but make them both negative. So negative square root 2 over 2, negative square root 2 over 2. Remember cosine, sine. And then the last one in this quadrant is 60 degrees away from the x-axis, just like this one is 60 degrees away from the x-axis. So I'm going to take this ordered pair, 1/2 square root 3 over 2, put it over here, but I'm going to make them both negative. Now, if you understand that, you could fill out these two quadrants easily. Find the one that is 30 degrees away from the x-axis and use this quadrant or this ordered pair. Same thing over here. All right, so now I'm going to do a little practice on our graphing. That was on your homework the night before. I'm going to do this one, and you're going to do this one for homework. So here's our first graph, our first equation, and it's a sine curve. And I see this negative, which is a reflection, so think reflection on this. And the amplitude is 3. It's always distance from the midline to the high or low point, never negative. The period on sine and cosine is 2 pi divided by the absolute value of b. This is my b term right here, so that's pi. So my period is pi. And my units, remember, we just take our period and divide by 4. How do we use that? Well, on the x-axis, I'm going to make every single unit pi over 4. So 1 pi over 4, 2 pi over 4, 3 pi over 4, 4 pi over 4. I'm just reducing all these. That can be reduced. That can't be reduced. 5 pi over 4, 6 pi over 4, 7 pi over 4, 8 pi over 4. And on the other side is just the negative values of these over here. So negative pi over 4, negative pi over 2, negative 3 pi over 4. And the last one, negative pi. And remember, pattern, the sine has a pattern, the cosine has a pattern. The pattern for sine is 0 max, 0 min, 0. Now that's the pattern if there's no reflection, but there is a reflection here. So everything above the x-axis will be flipped below. So every maximum becomes a minimum, and every minimum becomes a maximum. So I always start at the y-axis, and at the y-axis I'm at 0. The first unit to the right, which we determined was pi over 4, is going to be at a minimum, and the minimum will have an amplitude of 3, so we go down here. Then the next one to the right is 0, and the next to the right is a maximum, and then back to 0. And if you did this correctly, that fourth one, 1, 2, 3, 4, should match the period, and it does. The period was pi. And then this pattern keeps going on forever. 0 min, 0 max, 0 min, 0 max, 0 min, 0 max, and then going backwards, you can just start, look here, max, 0, min, 0, max, max over on this one. Then back to 0, then a min, and then 0 again. So this should be my curve, and these are curves. They're not little triangles. Okay, they're curves. And again, this graph is an infinite curve, goes on forever in both directions. All right, so that is a review of graphing. I want you to write this one down because this is due on your homework with the front completed with degrees, radians, and ordered pairs. Have fun.